Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the final Fallout Bar of the year here for the Premier League. I say of the year as if we're not going to run it for the match play and all the other PDC major events, but this is the final Premier League Fallout Bar of the season, and it's myself and Mr. Lee Boyce. And despite the way we're set up, we're actually sat up with each other. We're in the same room. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Jack. How are you doing?
Not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Obviously, we are here ready for the World Seniors Masters at the Lakeside. So we both travelled down today. We're in our hotel room. We've been out to watch the darts this evening, hence starting just that little bit later. We were travelling back from the place we were watching the darts at. But a big warm welcome to everybody that is joining us this evening. And obviously, if you don't know the results so far, it's a bit daft. We're going to go spoiler alert straight away. We have completed the set. Michael Smith has won a night in this Premier League. And to be honest, I think it's the most well-revered win of the season. Jack says delight for Smith, although Gary lost very late, but played well in defeat. HAV says, and we have a full house. Maliki says, hi, everyone. Michael Smith has won a round. Colin's in, he says evening. Matthew says good evening as well. And Craig says, go on the bully boy. Indeed, Lee. I think that's the one that everybody's sort of been waiting for. And I'd say the majority of the darts world are very, very happy for the bully boy.
Yeah, you have to be. You've been one of them that would have potentially had an impact on his year. I as we were talking through the final, that was something I was on about because of where Michael Smith's been, how close he's been on so many occasions. And yes, it's just a Premier League night win. However, it probably means a little bit more to him than it would to anyone else stepping over the line tonight. And who would have predicted him winning, eh?
That would be myself and Cam, actually. Both of us.
I'll set you up before.
Both of us backed Michael Smith. Cam's made sure that I let you all know that is how the predictions have gone for the last couple of weeks. But yeah, we have finally got one right. We both hung in there a little bit to back Michael Smith at the absolute final hour, and he has delivered for us on a night where there wasn't an awful lot to play for a lot of the players, but actually, in terms of matches, I've quite enjoyed tonight. There's been a fair few good battles. But we'll run through the matches in order at the minute. But I thought Gary Anderson was very, very good, even though he was beaten. I thought Peter Wright versus Joe Cullen match was very, very good indeed. Michael Smith was solid. Wade recovered from being significantly down on the averages to give Gerwen Price a real test. I thought the final was excellent. I thought semis waned a little bit, perhaps. But other than that, it's been a good night of darts, Lee, when actually the only people really playing for anything were Joe Cullen and Peter Wright. And once Joe Cullen wins that first game, he's playing for something a little bit more in the next one, but it's insignificant in the end.
You say only two people playing something. Tell Michael Smith that right now. He might tell you something completely different. But yeah, on what you're saying, it's from the quality we had last week to the quality we had this week are two completely different. We had, I think the highest average last week was 97. We saw obviously a per display from James, but there's circumstances there, but he was around 80. I think this week we've only had two averages in the late 80s. Yes, there's a lot of controversy around what the Premier League has brought this year, but there has been nights of quality, and this is probably one I would put into that when you think that there's not a lot to play for other than that one massive quarterfinal for Joe.
He has indeed. Before we do go any further, I just want one more comment here from Stewie C. So Smith has played very well recently, more consistent than Cullen, arguably. I don't think you need the word arguably, and here's my reasoning for it. Michael Smith is the only player to have not lost in the first round in the last 5 weeks. That's some feat in this field, considering that he'd had one semi-final and two runners-up before that in the entire campaign. And for the last 5 weeks, when if he converts one or two of them semi-finals into finals, we might be having a different conversation about where he finishes in the league table as well. But to do that 5 weeks on the spin for a man that is constantly criticised by not having enough bottle, for want of a better word, at the back end of a campaign that hasn't gone your way, to be undefeated in the first round while everybody else is dropping games here, there and everywhere is a solid feat for him.
Oh, yeah, without doubt. And when you actually looked at it now, he's only finished 1 point behind Peter Wright. Michael Smith hasn't lost the first round for 5 weeks. Peter Wright hasn't won a first round for 5 weeks. It just shows. I know we're talking about Joe there and comparison, but with some of these players in the field, Michael Smith's certainly in a better position. And coming into now, what is the busy end of the PDC calendar, that win will mean so much for Michael Smith. And hopefully we'll see Bully Boy push on. And I know we'll touch on the Dames individually, but there were certain moments tonight that will help Michael Smith a lot moving forward.
Yeah, I think now's the good time to start looking at the other games, because otherwise we're going to start talking about the scoreline early on in the final, and then there's no point talking about the rest of the evening. So game number 1, as I said, Gary Anderson whacked out the darts that he won the World Championship with, the silver coating, the double blue ring. They're just a bit special in darting history. And it was a pretty special performance from Gary, to be fair. The 1-2-6 from Johnny Clayton changed the match, but it was, 16 weeks too late. But we finally saw a glimpse of the Gary Anderson that we all know and love.
15 weeks too late. Was it Nottingham where he put in the 1 week of, that made up more than half his wins? But performance-wise, it was one of his best in the Premier League. Easy to say now with someone who's finished bottom, but lost 6-5, disappointing in that aspect. But it was a very, very good Gary Anderson. I had a lot to say about him on Monday night. Worrying if there was one more bid, running him at a competition, hoping more than expecting. And then tonight, he's shown that there is glimpses if he uses those darts, and not only using those darts from a performance-wise, as a darts fan looking at them, they are a thing of beauty. Let's be honest, they really are. And we were saying it after the first 3 practice darts, I think, that as soon as they hit the board, it was just then looking forward to what he could produce on the night. And it was unfortunate that he couldn't get over the line.
Yeah, clock those darts straight away as a fan of Gary and the things that he did for that couple of year run. Holy moly, they just bring back some good memories. The game itself, though, as I said, turned on the head by the 1-2-6 checkout from Johnny Clayton. Gary Anderson doing all the hard work early on, as has been the story of his campaign, really. Except this time he was actually putting himself into the lead for a change. But job done by Johnny Clayton, who has just been exceptional in this Premier League campaign. He doesn't give up any easy wins. He's made half the amount of tournament finals. And again, that's a point to make when we get to the final, but he's just ridiculous when he wants to be.
And at the moment, when he wants to be, seems to be every week, near enough. In the majority of tournaments, we've seen a couple of per Euro Tour appearances, but over the past 18 months, when you look at Johnny Clayton, there's not been many really standout per performances. And even today, if this was week 4, week 5, where players are actually playing for points that mean something, you'd be pulling this out as a great performance because of how well Gary Anderson plays and for Clayton to get over the line. When Gary looked on, it was just showed how good Johnny Clayton is potentially right now. If you're looking over like a 6-9 month period, potentially the best player in the world.
Ooh, big claim. We will touch on that. We will touch on that when we talk about the final and the campaign as a whole. A word on Gary Anderson. Monday night, I'll be honest, I was completely with you. And I still, despite this evening and that one performance in a best of 11 match, think they might well be the last darts Gary Anderson ever throws in a PDC Premier League campaign. And it's disappointing he's not gone out with a win, but I suppose in this format, you'd have to win 2 more to then go out with a win.
The only way...
If this was the league, if this was the old league format, he beats Johnny Clayton 6-5 and he takes a big bow off the stage. Fair play, Gary. Job well done. Hit and miss in the Premier League, but a lot of players have been. Fantastic career. This year was probably your payoff year, if you like, for being a big name. Don't have to commit to it next year. Get yourself some time back with the family, and hopefully that means you pick off a few more of the other events instead.
My heart still, and I said this on Monday, my heart still thinks he's got a big one in him. That is the only thing that changes him being in the Premier League then. If he wins a match play, Grand Prix, Slam, Worlds, we now have to throw Masters into that mix. If he wins one of those, then he's probably back in. But even a final, unless it's the World Final, I don't see him being back then. But what a servant he's been to the Premier League. If this is his last Premier League game, what a servant he's been, and what a game he played for his last one. no one expected 100 from him today. No one expected the 180s and how well he was playing. Perfect, was it sits as well in one leg, with a 180, 177. So fair play to Barry Anderson. And like I says, if it is a way to leave the Premier League, it's not a bad way, even though it is a loss.
Yeah, completely agree. On to his former Scotland World Cup of Darts teammate Peter Wright in the showdown match of the evening. And once again, it feels a bit weird. I mean, the venue we watched this at had no volume on the game. So we were watching in just, well, we were just watching the pictures. So I have no idea what the crowd sounded like. But I will hazard a guess that the rest of the evening went pretty flat at times after this match is done, because there was so little to play for. In a normal, again, league phase, this game meaning something and being a one-off game where you don't play any more subsequent games afterwards would have been on last.
Yes.
And it being in second, because of the way this format's worked out, because of the draw bracket being fixed on night 16, it sucked a little bit away from the night. However, the performance itself from Joe Cullen was nothing short of exceptional on the double 16, and that was clearly the difference maker in this game. I thought Peter Wright looked solid. You kept saying to me as you sat next to me that the longer this goes on, the more chance Peter Wright has got. It went tight, and Joe Cullen will want to take home that double 16 segment on that specific board and marry it, because they were just so in sync tonight.
Yeah. The thought on Joe Cullen messing it up was more on the base of just the Masters. It was what I'd seen the back end. The last time we'd really seen Joe in a game that he had to win. Yes, he won, but it took plenty of opportunities. And because this was quite tight, double 16 obviously sits out of sits. Only dart he missed was at the bull. However, one thing he was doing, he was very comfortable in a lot of these leads, and that seemed to play to his favour. His scoring was better than Peter's, it seemed, throughout the game. On the ton to 1-3-4s, using treble 90 quite a bit, and it was just when he was getting down to there, we was talking about it on one of the chat outs. It was just making sure he leaves double 16. If he does, he pins it, and then he's talking about someone hitting double 16. If you look at it, you could probably just take the middle of that double 16 and give it to Joe tonight. You don't need the whole segment of the bed, because the majority of them were spot on. And fair play to the rock star. Yes, I'll throughout that game, as you've just told everyone, I was saying, this is Peter Wright's, this is Peter Wright's. But it wasn't to be. It wasn't to be. And 5 weeks without winning the first round game, if he wins one of those, is potentially...
He did win one, or was it a bye? There was 1 week that's showing as a semi-final.
I think he's won one, has he?
To
Week 11 was his last one?
15 is showing as a semi-final. What happened
last James week? Wade.
Yeah.
He beat James Wade last week. I'll let him off with that one. Playing then someone who's averaging 18 in the Premier League.
Yes.
But that aside, it wasn't just a huge opportunity that Peter Wright hasn't taken. And he can only hold himself to blame.
You can. And look, for me, I want to get a little bit deep on this conversation now, and it's literally just popped into my head. But you look at the players in the last couple of years that have been, I don't want to say the word great, but have been the top of the game in the modern era. Your Peter Wright, your Gerwen, Price, etc. Is this what sets Michael van Gerwen and Phil Taylor apart from players that have played the game in the last 20 years? Because you think about just how dominant they were in every single event they entered, every different little niche format as well. You think double in didn't matter to them, leg play, set play, etc. They were relentless in all of it. Gerwen Price has never made the playoffs at the Premier League.
Correct.
Peter Wright's been to the finals once, lost in that final to the finals once, finals twice, one of the two. But other than that, he's been in there a significant amount of times. These are two high-profile, big-name players that whenever they are relying on consistency, that has seen them to become the last two world number ones in the game, cannot deliver it consistently against the other big boys of the sport right now.
I've spent all night with you and you've not brought this point up at all.
It literally just occurred to me.
Yeah, probably all right. At the moment, when we are talking about the best players right now, if you had to pick 2-3 players, Peter Wright and Gerwen Price are not in those top 2 or 3 right now. And they have had those dips when they have been world number 1, which we haven't really seen from Michael van Gerwen until obviously that faded out and he dropped off the ranking, same with Phil Taylor. There isn't that dominance about those 2 as world number 1. There's concerns about Peter, the amount of games he's lost recently in the Premier League. As I said, the form in that back end, he was week 11, week 12, we were talking that the top 4 was done and dusted. And Peter was part of that and challenging towards winning that league, not just being in there. For him to fade as he has done, a lot of question marks about him. And he's still got to hold on to that number 1 spot, because if it's memory serves me right, it's still a couple of months before any prize money goes off from 2 years. So Derwin can still jump above him, and to lose that so quickly after gaining it, after the fight he had for it, would be another knot on for Peter Wright.
The fact he's played so badly over recent months in comparison to what we expect from Peter Wright, he is in a little bit of a dip of form right now. He's not gone anywhere near, for instance, that match play run last year. The fact he has held on to world number 1 and extended that lead at times via the Euro Tour, and there's been events where Peter Wright's not been there and Gezzy's not taken advantage, and then the following week it might be the inverse and Peter just ekes out a little bit more advantage. It says something about his qualities, because if he can do that on a regular basis in every other event that counts to ranking money, why can't he do that in the Premier League when it's virtually the same thing? Do you know what I mean? If you can eke out performances and keep extending leads, that's what you need to do in this to get yourself in the final 4. And yet you put him up there when he is one of the bigger stage players. He comes alive on a big stage. It is weird that Peter Wright can't produce that on a Premier League stage week in, week out.
Is it? Well, there's more to it. Is it the short format? I know we have that on the Euro Tour and he's been successful plenty of times on that, but that's short format, winning 4 games on the Sunday, coming and playing on the Saturday, and he's sort of building himself up then to that final. Is it different? I know we've had 3 games for on this year, but has that maybe had an impact on it? I don't think the crowds at all have a impact on Peter's performance in a negative way with him being there. It's just something missing at the moment. And when I say at the moment, it's been about 2 or 3 months, not just since this bad run in the Premier League. Still think there's something missing from his game. I'm not sure what's changed. His persona just isn't the same. Even coming onto the stage, there's not sort of that same feel about it. But we've seen him go into a match play with absolute no form before and don't want to lift that, and that's not a long way away. Plus, he's got the World Cup coming up, which he's got to defend with Hendo, and we know Hendo will throw absolutely everything at it. So there's something maybe there that's just that little bit of a confidence boost, bit of motivation that he might need of having a partner. We spoke about it about a number of other teams, but might be something that Peter needs. But right now it is worrying times with the back end of the season just about to start with a match play.
Yeah, we thought tonight's show was going to be short, by the way. We're 20 minutes in already. We've only spoken about 2 games. Like, oh, it's all right. We're not doing predictions because we are going to save those for the live lounge ahead of the Premier League finals night, the next time that myself, Lee and PB are all together to discuss that. There's absolutely no point now when we've got a couple of weeks break sitting there taking everything's going to win. When in 3 weeks' time, that may well change, especially as it's me and Lee that will be on that live lounge as well. Just to run over a few more comments at this point. HJV says 6 times double 16 is remarkable. Completely agree. Everybody knows my feelings towards the man, but it's a bit James Wade-esque on tops and tens, isn't it? It's just, I'm going to do everything to leave that. And it works. Henry from the team is in. He says, evening, fellas, have you got the karaoke sorted for the weekend? Lakeside isn't Lakeside in the modern era without it. I'll take your word for that, mate, and I'm going to try it a little bit differently. I hear Lee's voice once a week without singing. I dread to think what it's like when he's caterwauling at the same time.
What's actually happened, Dobby's Lakeside have banned karaoke machines since someone done Robbie Williams just a few weeks back at Lakeside.
Not Angels. I don't touch Angels.
It was so much out of tune, no offence, Henry, that it could have been any of his songs. He's not on, so I didn't say what I want. Sorry, Henry, I apologize.
Quality. Jason said they might have 2 sets of different weight darts or something. I think he was given a bag full of about 10 different sets that all had little subtle differences when he picked these new darts up, and I'm not sure about which ones he was throwing tonight. Sam says this event has never been kind to Gezi. He's always said he prioritizes the big ranking events to maintain his high status. Yeah, I mean, look, he's had the hand injury this year. He missed the year through COVID, etc. It's not been the happiest of hunting grounds for him. Either that wasn't a dig at Peter Wright, or Gezi just a little bit of an observation section. Wright's been to the final twice. Thanks for the information as well. The Oracle predicted the night. What, myself and Cam? We both nailed it, mate. Bless him. Cam's in the background giving me crap because he says my glasses make me look like James Wade. And Reed's giving it a little bit of a chuckle. Right, where were we? Match number 3 for the 4th time in 4 straight weeks in the Premier League. And for the 7th time in 16 weeks, Michael Smith and Michael van Gerwen did battle tonight. And Michael Smith came out on top 6-4. Of course you did, because he went on to win the bloody night. So if you didn't know this bit, you could have guessed it anyway. 6-4, good performance from Michael Smith. Pretty level early on. You thought when Van Gerwen takes out the 155 that maybe he's about to threaten something and just break at that crucial moment. The 114 from Michael Smith, all on 19s, was absolutely superb. You saying how much you absolutely love that route. I despise it. But look, under pressure, when it means the most, to Michael Smith, forget going on to win this title. Forget the pressures of lifting anything. The personal pressure that Michael Smith will have put himself under heading into week 15. We heard it in his interview at the end of the day where, that'll shut the trolls up now. That'll do this. That'll do that. How on earth he can ever concentrate on just throwing darts when all of that is going through his head is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and to add to that, his opponent would not want Michael van Gerwen's aim tonight would have made sure that Michael Smith is leaving without a win, because he doesn't want anyone else being confident going into tournament coming up now to have all that. And MVG, yeah, his scoring wasn't there, but even early on in that game when he fired in the 155, there were still signs there of MVG throwing some decent stuff. It's just, we said, I'm sure PB mentioned it on Monday, he's just someone who needs something to fight for, some extra motivation, and to not be able to finish top will have an impact. To know, I think it's had an impact personally the past few weeks, not having that prize money had been there. But when Johnny's been in the form he has, but then Michael Smith, I know we'll touch on him in his semi-final and final, but to get over the line against MVG, he's very, very impressive in the way he did it. And yeah, I love that 114. I'm a huge fan of that 19 group. Staying on one bed, staying on one segment, sorry. I'm all for it with any checkouts, even if it is the 19s and it was just all 3 darts were plumb. So yes, Bully Boy. I know you despised it when I said it. I wish I could show the reactions.
I just wouldn't go for it that route myself. Is basically what I'm saying. It's 18s and 20s and a combination of both. Look, we're going to talk a lot more Michael Smith very, very shortly. Michael van Gerwen, though, we haven't had a chance to verify this stat, but you brought it up after seeing it on Twitter that this is the first time since, was it 2013? I'm going to get that stat up as we speak. It was 2011. Since 2011, so 11 years since Michael van Gerwen last lost 4 consecutive games in the PDC. That has happened once again this year. And after all of the slump of last year, where there was talks about Michael van Gerwen never ever getting to the top of the game again, he's finished, he's never going to win a major, he's never going to win a ranking event. The fact that he went all of last year without one of those is quite astounding at times. He started the year so positively, picking up Euro Tour events and whatever else, played pretty well in the Premier League. But the last 4 weeks just still show that little bit of weakness, perhaps, because there was a time when he loved nothing more than going up on a stage, on an hockey, and battering his opponent no matter what it was to play for. And it's been a very, very busy period for these guys. Don't forget that we had that midweek Pro Tour that pretty much seemed to start all of this off. It was Premier League Thursday, Euro Tour over the weekend, midweek Pro Tour, Premier League, Euro Tour, etc. And in between that on the Friday nights, the players are taking advantage of the fact that Europe is now open again. and everybody wants exhibitions, and the players are sneaking those in on a Friday night if they're seeded for the Euro Tour Saturday as well. If they're already travelling back that way, if it's halfway, etc., they're making the most of it. It's been an incredibly busy couple of weeks for Marco van Gerwen, but I guess this just goes back to the whole managing your schedule debate as well. But is there a concern that he may have burnt himself out a little bit too early when the Premier League finals are a few weeks away? You've got the World Series now, it's a lot of travelling, and then the one that he's going to be targeting, just to send a statement, as everybody is the World Match Play. And he's almost playing himself out of form ahead of the first big, real 2 trophies.
I think it's with the amount of darts that MVG's got to play. I'm not sure he's playing himself out of form just yet. The worry is what you're saying, the burnout of that. There's guys just about to travel. With a number of them, he's just about to travel to America to play in a World Series. He's got the World Cup. He's got the Premier League finals night. He's got opportunities there, as much as we're saying about burnout. He's also got opportunities to put himself in the form he was in just a few weeks ago when he's winning back-to-back Euro tours and he's demolishing the field. I'm not concerned as much about tonight. I think that motivation wasn't there, and I still think Michael is motivated heavily by that extra. Let's I can go and win X amount for finishing top of the league. Was it 25k before? All that motivation. I don't think he's really had that the past couple of weeks in the Premier League. He's been secure in there. Euro Tour results. Martin Luthman punished him on Saturday, but the week before that, it was very impressive by Luke Humphries. So I'm not overly concerned about MVG. I'm still in the camp that MVG is back to not where he's been, but he's not far off that. And we'll see him lift a TV title in the next month or so, whether that be a World Series, World Cup, something like that. I fully expect MVG to be lifting silverware soon.
Does the World Series count?
Is it on TV?
Michael Smith doesn't count it.
Is it on TV?
I'll tell Bully Boy that. Anyway.
No, Michael Smith doesn't count it. Is Michael Smith dancing tonight as a TV title then?
It should do. Anyway, it's nearly half an hour, and now we're moving on to game number 4. I think we're just going to whiz through the semi-finals and jump straight to the final. Gezi getting the job done over James Wade. Gezi leading early on, Wadey looking not as off as he was last week, but there's still clearly signs of issues with James Wade right now after that stay in hospital. The average did increase significantly, and somehow James finishes with the better average over the Welshman, but 6-12 on the doubles for Gezi Price, the thing that digs him out of trouble here against James. I think heading into this match, they played each other 5 times, and it was 4-1 in James's favour head-to-head in this campaign. That will do Gezi. I don't want to say it would do him the world of good, but when you start correcting big differences in head-to-head records, it bodes well for when you play them again next time.
Yeah, it does. It was a win that Gezi needed. His Premier League faded away in the middle of the season. However, it was just, I think, that these last few weeks of just about him finding some form, finding better performances. But what we will say tonight is he didn't find a better performance, but seems to get over the line somehow. And it's very weird to see James Wade with a higher average and losing. Normally he's got the lower average and winning. It's very strange for James Wade to be on the opposite side of that.
Especially a game sub-90 as well. If it was like, both players are chucked in 102 and lost, okay, you can sort of understand that if it's one break. But for a sub-90 game like that, usually James Wade's getting the job done.
James Wade's at the most 180s. He's got the highest average and he's lost today. It's honestly the opposite of what normally happens. It's normally the other way around. But it was a win. Yeah, he hasn't done on and progressed much further now. We're going to sort of pass through the semi-finals quite easily. So it's no real spoiler if he loses to Bully Boy in the semi-finals. But just for Desi to get another win and get to back playing to the hand injury, get rid of the hand injury, and that's all cleared up. We know obviously that the boxing's now been put to one side and his focus now is on picking up more ranking money, getting back to world number 1 and getting on that World Series as well. So positives there for Gerwen Price. And with Peter Wright not playing as well as he has been, there is that motivation of becoming world number 1, I think, for Desi. I'm assuming, without looking at it, like by the match play, if he went on and lifted that, he'd be back in that spot. So
I don't know about looking into it deeper. Let's move on to the semi-finals. I did say we're going to race through them. We're not going to talk too much about the matches. Johnny Clayton beats Joe Cullen 6-4, and Michael Smith gets the job done 6-3 on Gerwen Price. However, when we spoke about Joe Cullen and Peter Wright earlier, we spoke about how it was a little bit of an issue that Peter Wright can't get over the line. Let's talk Joe Cullen very quickly, because at that point we seem to neglect the fact he has actually qualified for finals night in his first campaign in the Premier League, joining them. The group of players that have done that in the last couple of years. Dozer did it. Did Aspinall do it? Johnny Clayton went on to lift the title and do it. Joe Cullen could potentially join that group as well.
And this is a player who...
Didn't Jose make the final as well?
Jose
in his first year.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous run recently of new guys coming in, making that Final Four that actually, without being disrespectful to any of those players, if you line them up against the names that have been in the Premier League and the experience everybody's got, a lot of them did not start anywhere near favourite to qualify according to bookies or whoever else, pundits alike, had written off the majority of these players before the campaign started, going, or they might finish 7th or 8th out of 10. They'll avoid the drop, but they'll do this, they'll do that. To go on and make the final, as so many of them have, and Joe Cullen becomes the latest to do so, is a fantastic feat, and one that just sums up that actually, I've been pretty harsh on Joe Cullen in this campaign, saying that his B game perhaps isn't up to scratch, but when he delivers his A game, he's done enough over 16 weeks, which means he delivers it more often than not to make that Final Four.
To think it's a player who come January after the World Championships probably wasn't supposed to. If someone would have said at that time there's only 8 in the Premier League, Joe's name wouldn't have been in that mix. For him then to go on and lift the Masters, then finishing the top 4, you don't think last week, majority, including myself, you and PB, if I remember right, all had written Joe Cullen off making the playoffs because it was Gerwen Price who was going to have that late push. Then Joe's had the run of winning last week, then picked up the win, beating Peter Wright back-to-back in 2 weeks. What Joe's done to Dead here is huge. There's only 2 more wins he is from lifting that Premier League title. And as you said, his A game is as good as anyone else. Can he do it? Who knows? However, to be where he is a fantastic achievement from Rockstar, and has probably shut a lot of people up, a lot of pundits, a lot of people like ourselves who have done along the lines of saying that, you know, that B game isn't there, or his A game isn't consistent enough, and we don't see it as often as what we should. He'd done enough tonight. I think everyone predicted on Monday that the winner of Johnny and Peter wouldn't get through that semi-final tonight, and that was nothing against them, but more about the fact that that quarter-final was just huge. So no real surprise to see Joe lose against Johnny. But what a fantastic achievement by Joe Cullen to come into this Premier League, completely new format as a debutant and reach semi-finals.
Yeah, I mean, the loss against Johnny does open up a little bit of a, not a wormhole, but a discussion point in the fact that Joe Cullen was the beneficiary of 2 buys earlier in the season, 4 points in total for that. Without those, look, who knows if he'd have won either of those games, and then we're having a completely different conversation. Potentially would not have finished in this 4th spot. However, Peter Wright's had the opportunity to beat Joe Cullen a couple of times in the last couple of weeks and not taking it. And there's also the discussion about the spacing between points. It's 2 points for the first win, then it's an extra point, then it's an extra 2, etc. Should that have been 2-2-2, or however you want to garner it anyway? So I don't want to discuss that tonight, though. I think we're going to save that for the live lounge when there's me, you, and Phil. A little bit more time to look at all the permutations of what would have happened if these are all the points. Who are they playing? Is it realistic? And actually, I don't particularly want to take the gloss off of Joe Cullen's moment here either, because we can look into the table and go, well, actually, he's been fortunate there. But everybody knew the rules at the start. It was set out. We've criticised the PDC in the past for other things, but for tonight, Joe Cullen is a Premier League finalist.
Yeah, just one thing on it though, and not going into the format, and that'll mean what it does mean though is he'll play Johnny next week, and not potentially. Oh well, he would have played MVG if he'd have got the win. Would Johnny have been better playing Joe than James? Because Joe's in the better form, you'd say, obviously with the illness of James Wade recently, that in theory, Johnny potentially could have been better losing this one than he has down on to win it, to set up with that performance with Joe Cullen, as we've said about the debutants having those runs. So there was another spin to it, that if Joe would have won and got to the final, that Joe would have been playing MVG instead of the other way around.
Well, the last 3 weeks, there's a serious argument to say that Joe Cullen and Johnny Clayton are in significantly better form than James Wade and Michael Van Gerwen, and that it's a little bit harsh that the two form players will play each other, the two slightly out of form players will play each other, and we'll have a form versus an out of form. But we do have a few days, more than a few days. We've got a World Series event in between the finals and all sorts between now and then. But let's look at the final tonight then, Lee. Johnny Clayton 3, Michael Smith 6. And this was something I alluded to in the very, very first game of the night about Michael Smith getting over the line, etc. And how big a moment Michael Smith was. This was for Michael Smith to get over the line. The fact that nobody else is really playing for anything at this point. It's an extra 10 grand in Johnny Clayton's back pocket, but he's already picked up 5 night wins in 7 other finals that he's been in this campaign, which, by the way, in this format, in this field and format, is a ridiculous achievement.
It's not bad, is it? It's not bad.
When that stat was chucked at us on the TV coverage in the final, saying this is his 8th final in 16 weeks, I'm like, holy something. Superb from Johnny. But look, as I said, there's no pressure on anybody else, but there's so much pressure on Mark Smith from himself. And at 4-0 up, when he starts to let Johnny Clayton back into the match, let's be honest, every single person watching that coverage, somewhere in their minds went, oh, we've seen this before.
Yes. Tops the 5-1 one dart that he pulled. And it was one of those moments, and you are just thinking, just that over the line, bully boy, please. Doesn't matter how you do it, doesn't matter what the average is, doesn't matter if you do it as Mardell wanted with a 170. Honestly, made no difference how he got on the line. It was just that total relief. And we talked about Luke Humphries and how much it means to be in the Premier League. For Michael Smith, it's just about winning one night, and it seems to have played on his mind since probably the early stages of the new format. And the fact now that we had 7 out of 8 winning, and he was the only one, there was going to be a lot of talk about probably the back end of the year, if he hasn't done a won anything, should he be back in, and all those sort of conversations. But now he's won a night. He's shut up a few doubters, and from what he was saying, quite a few trolls that he seems to have coming through on him for not winning. And fair play from getting it over the line, and the way he did it as well with a fight back from Johnny Clayton. If we're all sitting here thinking, oh no, Michael's doing exactly the same to himself, and we know he is because he's quite animated on stage. We've seen it plenty of times. So for him to get over the line, fair play to Bully Boy, and what a win! The first final that's worth 15,000, though.
It is, because obviously at that point, not only did he win 10 grand for reaching the final, but it also jumped him over Gerwen Price into 6th position. Last week, Gerwen Price was in serious conversation for that final 4. He's finished 7th tonight, and Michael Smith winning the night has just cost him an extra 5 grand because of the difference in where the prize money you get for the bottom 4 being 5 grand difference.
Great win.
It's not bad, is it? If you're going to do it where it's worth an extra 50% on top to yourself because you just wrapped up 6th spot in the Premier League. And look, at that point, when you look at the final table, in a couple of years' time, when we move on from this and people forget who's withdrawn and whatever, it does make for grim reading for Peter Wright, Michael Smith, Gerwen Price, and Gary Anderson once again. Look, Gary Anderson absolutely miles off the pace. He won in Nottingham, and other than that, it's just not been. There's been a lot of first round losses for Gary. Gezi finishes on 20 points. Like the next 2 players are only on 22 above him, but that doesn't make for good reading again, does it? When you analyse his average position finish in the Premier League, for instance,
only 11 wins across 16 nights. When each night you can win 3 games, you think he's
potential 48 match wins to be won. Johnny Clayton has won exactly half of his matches.
Yeah,
he has won, well, not even half of his matches because he may not have played that many. He has won 24 matches. Because if you lose first round, you don't play an extra 2.
And to think there's that rivalry with Gerwen Price and Johnny Clayton, and Johnny Clayton has now, I don't want to say sort of surpassed Desi, because rankings will tell you otherwise, but when you look at this Premier League, and like you say, if you just looked at it on paper, you forget about all the boys, you forget about injuries, you forget about everything else that's done with it, illness, all those sort of things. Gerwen Price's biggest rivalry in these sort of events for me is going to be Johnny Clayton, because of the friendship they have, because of the sort of banter and what they throw off each other, and there's not a fight for world number 1 or those sort of things in this. It is just about beating those other 7 competitors. The fact that Desi's finished 7th will be very disappointing, considering last year he didn't play in this event at all, and he complained. There was a lot on social media when he was pulled out about, obviously, and that was back in the day of COVID and the testing and all that sort of things, but how disappointed he was to not playing it, to then coming it this year and finish 7th. He's going to be very disappointed, but there's also question marks about how he's finished 7th in regards to what's happened in between the event and all those sort of things that have got to be asked, because it would be wrong not to. So very, very disappointing campaign. And probably, I can't think of many people who would have predicted this as a top 4, and that is not slagging off the people who are in the top 4, but when you look at the 4 names who are not going to be in Berlin, they are 4 huge names.
Well, the world number 1 and the world number 2 have both just missed out.
Not expected to be like that. And Michael Smith, who's just come off World Championship final.
Yeah.
Have come into this event and they haven't. They're not in there. Not many would have predicted it that way at all. Which is full praise to the 4 who were there, but very, very disappointed from the performances of some of the others. And I would probably say, as Desi, as disappointing as Gary Anderson, yes, there's been more wins and there's been better, but for Gary Anderson coming in, it wasn't one of the favourites. Gerwen Price definitely was. So for me, even though the league table says 7th and 8th, probably as, if not more, disappointing than Gary Anderson's campaign for me.
I think it's Gezzy's got a number of years to put this right. And look, not everybody's going to sweep up every event and every play. And Peter Wright is far more experienced as one of the titles he has. He struggles in this campaign and format as well, as we've already discussed. Gezzy will get this right at some point. He has to.
I think the one thing is, it's playing these top 8 at the minute in the world, let's say they are, and from a Premier League status. These are players that if he's going to win titles this year, more than likely these are going to be the players he's going to be playing in semi-finals, finals. And these are the players that he was beating to
win major titles in the last 2-3 years. So the fact he's now struggling against them week in, week out, when, look, he is a player that I think we consider needs that little bit of aggression in his game. You're playing the best players in the world that you need to go and send a message to. Is it just the frequency of how often they're playing each other that has diffused that a little bit, in that it just doesn't quite mean as much because I'll get another chance to get you next week, etc., as we've been saying all along in this campaign. And adding to that, we've spoken about the inverse fortunes of Johnny Clayton and Gerwen Price and that little bit of rivalry as teammates. It's not massive rivalry, but do you think Johnny's got to a point where he's also diffused that with Gezzy, where he won from multiple different situations last year? He won where he absolutely steamrolled Gezzy. He won, was it in Leicester, when he was absolutely miles behind and he reeled that one off, etc. He has won from every position against Gerwen Price now. There's no fear of his World Cup captain. He's almost got his number.
Is that the same across all of them? I think Desi at one stage went about 11 out of 12 against Johnny before Johnny's run last year. Other players now are going to start having good form. And as you said, Wade, was it 4 out of the last 5 or 4 out of 5 in the Premier League? Players having that form over you. Then if you go into a World Championship or you go into the Grand Slam or Players Championship back end of the year and those tournaments, and people have got that record over you. Gerwen Price talks about it when it's the other way around, and he will soon tell you if he's won 10 on the spinner than someone and those sort of things. The players will do the same back. So I think it will have an impact that there isn't that fear anymore from these top boys against Gerwen Price where there was before because of that aggression. So plenty of question marks for Desi, I would say, coming up. But he's got that fighting spirit, and if his game is back, if his focus is solely on darts, there's a reason he was world number 1.
Completely agree. A few more in the chat room before we do wrap up for tonight. King Cook says, look, if you were Peter, would you feel hard done by considering Joe has had 2 buys? We touched on that a little bit, and we'll go back to that on the live lounge when we talk about this again in detail with Phil. The difficulty with those 2 buys is you don't know if Joe would have gone on and won those games. And if he does, is he in a better position for the rest of the night because he's not going in cold against an opponent that's already played one and got warmed up, etc. Sam says, absolutely bonkers that Johnny brings his form for the Premier League, but still yet to make a final or win a ranking event this year. Needs to be picking up them ranking events. Completely agree. And Johnny's world ranking position for the last 18 months has been incredibly false because he just mops up everything that doesn't carry any sort of weighting on the rankings. But at the same time, and here's the frightening bit, Lee. He has been in 8 finals and he has won 5 of them this year. Comfortably top this table. And I can only really think of 2, maybe 3 nights out of the 16 where I think he's played his best art. I think he's been making some of these finals. Even there's been the odd performance on some nights out of the 3, but I don't recall more than 2, maybe 3 nights this year where he has strung together 3 out of this world performances to go on and make a final or win a night. And everyone's talking about him being top of the table, comfortably, whatever else. I still think there's more to come from Johnny Clayton. I don't think this is his top form, and yet he has just comfortably topped the 7 other top 8 players in the world, according to the Premier League.
There was only one that I remember, and the only reason I remember it is the one I went to when he battered Wade in the final with a 110 plus average and a 105 or something in the semi-final. That's the only one I can remember where it was just a night where no one was sort of stopping him. At the moment, there's that it's inevitable he's going to win, even if he isn't playing well or playing to the standard that he can do. He's certainly got to go into Berlin in a couple of weeks as favourite for me, because he's playing the best out of the 4. Yes, there's bits of form from Joe, there's bits of form from MVG we probably saw last month, but there is plenty of darts to happen between now and then. We saw that probably the weekend with Peter, someone who's been off the radar completely and then had a 2 or 3 good games. So it's only 2 games, but Johnny's been in the situation before. We've seen him in Milton Keynes last year, and I think it's not been spoken about too much when we've been speaking about this year's Premier League, that he's the reigning champion of this Premier League. It's not mentioned enough for me, but he's going in as reigning champion. So we've seen him do this before. There's no reason why he can't go on and lift it then. And like I said, for me, he has to be favourite going in 2 weeks' time, just because of the form. And like I said, that inevitableness that we've seen before from MVG, we've saw from Gerwen Price, we've saw from Peter Wright in little spurts all the time. It seems like that's that time of Johnny Clayton that we are seeing when he's in that back end of a tournament, that he's unranked. He goes on and picks up the title.
One last point from us while we get the chat room talking a little bit. We're not going to do a prediction. We're copping out a little bit tonight. We're going to wait until we do this as a preview on the live lounge. But I do want you guys in the chat room to let us know who you think will lift the title on the 13th of June in Berlin. There's a couple of comments in the chat room that we're going to go over. Then we're just going to let you know what happens in the playoffs, tell you about a couple of other things going on for the next couple of days. And by then, hopefully enough of you have told us who you think is going to win the Premier League. So starting off, HJV says, I think Price will win the Premier League within 5 years. Difficult to disagree with a man that's been world champion and world number 1. However, there is something that I don't think gets mentioned or brought up or recognised enough. There is only something like 14 months difference in age between Gerwen Price and James Wade. And yet we're looking at Gerwen Price as if he's still very much at the start of his career and has got another 15, 20 years. In that case, so does James Wade.
You got me there because you know what I'm not.
Phil Bars is going to retire before James Wade does.
Phil Bars is going to retire. Phil Bars is going to retire. He could be listening now on his way back from Newcastle, and the day he's not going to retire. And he says it all because he's potentially driving back tonight from Newcastle and he's on his way to Lakeside. But yeah, I guess it's one of those that doesn't get spoken about as much because Gerwen Price is new to the sport.
Yeah.
You don't think we're talking about someone who's done and accomplished a profession in another sport for 10, 15 years and never done another one, whereas James Wade, we've seen him lift darts titles for, a few decades. So he probably doesn't get spoken about as much because, as well, I guess if you look in, you pinpoint the next 2 years, you would expect Gerwen Price to pick up more titles than James Wade. James Wade will pick up titles. There's no denying that. It is just what he does, but he doesn't do it consistently in the sense of a short period of time, doing pick up 3 or 4 on the bounce, like Desi will. But you're not going to rise off James Wade picking up a title between now and the end of the year, and the same with the next year and year on, because it is what James Wade tends to do. But they are very close in age. However, if you look at Tom, James Wade looks a bit like you, to be honest.
Cheeky bugger. Stars himself on me, clearly, because I'm an icon. The other comment I wanted to have a little look at was Maliki going, calling it now, Humphreys wins next year's Premier League. This one's not over, and the minute it is over, I refuse to talk Premier League until at least the end of October. Them just the rules. However, I sort of agree that Luke Humphreys might have done enough to put himself in there. 3 Euro tours out of the last 4 is a bit very good from the youngster. And if he carries on in the form that he's in right now, I completely agree that I think Luke Humphreys might be in it. Whether or not he goes on to win it, completely different matter. However, stage, TV cameras, best players in the world, rock up and do a stupid average. Sounds about Luke Humphreys to me.
My only worry with it, and this is before we're not obviously going to debate next year's picks for Premier League, but as we've seen this year, winning events early on in the year don't tend to put you on in the Premier League.
Yeah, winning the ranked European Championship means less than the Masters. But then we wouldn't be sat talking about the fact Joe Cullen is on to do a Glendoran.
But with Humphreys, he's unbelievable at the moment. But what we are seeing is he is picking up Euro Tours, which are a massive achievement to do on banter back. The fact is, when it gets closer and closer to the back end of the year, we've already seen Luke Humphreys talking about a Premier League that's 7-8 months away from starting. He's already talking about it. So if he hasn't won one or hasn't put himself in that position, come Grand Slam time, Players Championship, World Championship, those 3 the back end, the pressure on his shoulders is ridiculous because of him speaking about the Premier League. And he's also got the additional part of he's got a new baby coming back end of the year, is he? Obviously, that's then going to be slightly different, taking him away from the sport a little bit more because of looking after a young child. But it might be that if he hasn't won one by then, that pressure might be a little bit too much. But if he's in it, I do think this tournament format does suit Luke Humphreys.
Bang on. A few predictions are in the chat room there. Matthew Macy says Clayton goes back to back. HJV says Clayton beats MVG 11-8. And Sam Hill says Cullen Wade final, the underdog Joe wins it all on debut. I think I'll cry. As long as there's not a penalty shootout, as it seems to be that my football team are constantly going to in finals at the minute. Could be another one this weekend.
Dark shot.
Yeah, just digging it in there. As long as there's no penalty shootout on a James Wade loss, I think I'll be happy. HJV says Dorrant in the crowd was good to see. Completely agree. The man can drink a pint. Malakis has got MVG 10-8 Cullen. Finals 1st to 11. But yeah, close enough. There's even a correction 3 comments above when you've still gone, do you know what? I'm going to go with that one. Bless him. That's pretty much it for tonight. So much for our shorter show because we're not predicting anything. 55 minutes later. Now I'm going to waffle for about 3 minutes straight, telling you guys everything that is going on over the next few days. We currently have it on our TV screen in the hotel room right now. But if you have not had enough of your fix for darts, then do stay on the YouTube channel. Head over and watch the current other live stream, which is the Live League. Group B action coming to you guys in Champions Week. Great field involved. Just seen Jim McEwen taking on Darryl Pilgrim. Yeah, but head over and check that one out. No interviews for you tonight as yet. Phil's still sorting them out, but they will be 2 for you on our channel. One of them is Joe Cullen, which has just gone live on the YouTube channel, talking about the fact that he has qualified for the finals. And then the second one will be with tonight's winner, Michael Smith. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you get notified. And as soon as they upload, you guys will get told about it on whichever device you're logged into on YouTube. For the rest of the weekend, as I said right at the start of tonight, myself and Lee are currently recording this in a hotel room in Surrey because we are here for the World Seniors Masters here at the Lakeside. It will be live on TV this weekend. It'll be on BT Sport in the UK, Sport 1 in Germany. And for the rest of the world, you can buy a pay-per-view package of £10 for the entire weekend or £5 per session. Tickets are still available for all sessions. And as of tomorrow, don't buy them through the website. Buy them on the door. Just turn up, purchase your ticket, come and watch some of the absolute legends here at Lakeside. And if you turn up as somebody that's in our chat room right now, I promise you, Lee Boyce will buy your beer tomorrow. Because if we spin this show up for another 13 minutes, he gets paid. So Lee has promised to buy you a beer if you turn up and watch any of the World Seniors Masters. Gets underway tomorrow evening. Paul Lim and John Part, the opening match, will have to take on Phil Taylor last on tomorrow night as well. Tasty indeed. Really looking forward to that one. The Live Lounge will be back on Monday. Myself, Lee, and that's whoever else we find. Because this is the week where Phil is flying to New York.
It is the week that Phil is flying.
So we will be reviewing all of the seniors, myself, Lee, and whichever member of the team we drag in as our third. We'll also be looking back at the Euro Tour. So whichever team member we bring in, hopefully, will have watched that throughout this weekend because that is in Zwolle this weekend.
We'll be watching. There's no other sport on. There's no other sport on this weekend.
We'll work it all out. If you don't follow us on social media, please make sure you do so at Online Darts. And I guess a big thank you to all of our sponsors as well throughout this Fallout Bar campaign here at the Premier League to win more Red Dragon and Modus who back us all year round. But incredibly to BoyleSports who have made this show happen throughout this campaign. They've backed all of our Premier League coverage. They helped us out a massive amount last year as well through some of the events, including the Grand Prix. So yeah, a massive thank you to all of those guys for making this show happen. To you guys in the chat room for making this happen as well. You guys have been absolutely superb with us for the last 16 weeks. We've been doing this. And it will return once again for the Premier League. No fallout bars for the World Series. It's just not enough action. I think, Lee, that's about it. That's the longest outro in the world. Thank you to you for being here.
Massive shout out to Tam, who has done an awful lot of these fallout bars. When I've not jumped on, it was a me and Dob split, but Tam has jumped on and done an awful lot of these. So massive shout out to Tam from our team, who has been probably done about 13, 14 of these, maybe more than you, because you've had a few.
I've had like 3 off, I think. Yeah, so I'll give him that.
Huge shout out to Cam.
Huge shout out to Cam as well. He's been a massive part of this show. Yeah. Who was predicted Michael Smith to win about 10 times in this campaign, and it finally came true for him this week as well, which is the perfect way to end the show. Superb from him, from the rest of the team, and from all of you guys watching at home. A massive thank you for joining us this evening, and hopefully we'll see you on Monday for the Live Lounge. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and we'll speak to you very soon. That's the wrong button.